business as we move forward. And there are slight changes in priorities when you do analysis between men and women, successful men and women. The same criteria hold there, but they're slightly differently arranged, so studies tell us. So back to city life again, one of the things we're fairly sure is going to happen, or is already happening, is we're moving towards a concept of sharing. The millennials and the Gen Ys, who are hoping to be the mavericks of the future, are now constrained by needing to get a job and kowtow and are living in cities, and increasingly can't afford very much at all, and are borrowing and hiring and renting and using, not owning, which is the boomer mentality. So we need to understand that a younger generation doesn't necessarily, all of them at least, aspire to ownership. They prefer to join a car club for a vehicle, rent a flat, live a lifestyle that is more pleasurable than committing to funding a purchase attitude and mentality. Very different again. And the final thing I want to say about smart cities is in the future we'll want the system to know what we're doing and where we are and what we're about to do. Because it will make our life easier on how to get to the next place, how to manage interaction between people, to manage a diary. If you've got a smartphone in your pocket, it's already polling where you are to several universities in the UK who are doing studies mapping individuals and mapping society to try and understand flows of people in cities. And they've now got it down to the point where they can recognise individuals by their gait, by the movement of their smartphone in their pocket or bag or the way they move. So they're tracking individuals. They don't know your name, but they don't need to know your name. They're beginning to work out at a very micro level actually how societies work, and then model that into cities in terms of transportation and infrastructure that's needed to run a modern city in the future. But we have to let people know what's in our diary and where are we going next, so that the tube or the bus system can expand or contract depending where the population is going next. And we will want to do that because we'll want more public transport to have capacity to suit our lifestyles. So we'll open up Keynote and we'll start sharing information with transportation systems. And of course they'll also know who you're around. And that'll have a big impact on people like the regulator, who'd like to know where were you and what were you doing when you made a decision to buy a product. And I can track that by knowing who's polling from their phone around you. So life's going to get very interesting going forward in terms of how those devices are used. A little bit about work. So, work's changing. Number one is we're going to be about 68 million short of the working age population by today's standards in the European Union over the next 40 years. So we need to increase our population in Europe by about 100 million. So perhaps you give me a show of hands who think we can manage to successfully bring 100 million immigrants into Europe. Who reckons we can do that? We're not traditionally very good yet at encouraging folk to come into the EU. We're struggling with assimilation, we're struggling with the definition of economic migrant versus illegal migrant, and we're really going to have to think of other ways to make ourselves more economically active. Either you work later and you generate revenue for the EU by your economic activity, or we have to bring value in from outside through engaging with the world and repatriating that value back to the UK. So, one small thing, of course, now there's technology. We've automated our manual processes very often, we've automated our clerical processes very often with our IT and systems. We're increasingly automating our managerial decision making in our businesses, and of course ultimately now the professions are very much using tools themselves to service clients, and ultimately those tools will be used by the clients themselves. So professional services will increasingly be automated with knowledge systems, artificial intelligence and other devices and tools that allow us to get to a sort of near close version of professional standard service. And of course AI is one of the promises that we've been talking about for a number of years. By 2019 or thereabouts, we're looking at around about weak AI, which is a definition of the ability of technology to replace a human being. So it's a bit pejorative, isn't it, really, to describe it as that, but there you are, that's what it's called, weak AI. So that change is coming. Now, alongside all the growth in the UK, which is primarily around our service sector and our specialist manufacturing sector and photonics and all the other things that are new, they're very exciting, but the fast growth areas are in technology, are in consultancy, are in the media and creative industries, are in the legal profession and accounting profession. So high growth over this next few years as we move towards 2017. So great if you're in those service industries and increasingly going to be using technology to deliver services to people. The other thing about new jobs is we're going to do jobs now in the future that we didn't do in the past. We can make now, technically, most body parts. Using your DNA, using part of your DNA to generate it in the lab, we can make you a new liver or kidney, and that's going to be part of the science in the next few decades. It's going to allow people to live a lot longer as spare part body parts are able to be reproduced. So a whole bunch of stuff to do with aging, not least of all memory augmentation because of dementia and Alzheimer's and some of those sort of more tragic diseases that inflict us as we get older. We're going to have ways of augmenting and making up for the loss of that as we wait to find cures for those things. New jobs on climate control. We've already got climate police working out of the United Nations who stop people seeding silver nitrate and similar chemicals into clouds as they pass over your territory to stop you stealing the rain that belongs in the next territory. And they do police that to stop wars between some of the parched parts of the world. And increasingly, of course, there'll be more parched parts of the world. We'll have to have more police out there making sure that you're not stealing somebody else's rainfall. As it's already happening, it's not really very much of a future statement. It's happening now, and those sort of jobs are going to increasingly happen because of weather and climate change. Of course, the virtual world is going to be exciting. We'll need virtual lawyers because we can create IP, intellectual property, and knowledge, and products and services in virtual worlds, and we need virtual lawyers and virtual police, which you've already got, by the way, as you know. Even the British police force, well, the Metropolitan Police, is quite a sizable police force, policing virtual worlds for a whole bunch of different reasons. And you can make money in those places, or you can have your money stolen. So they're the wild west of banditry of business that's going on right now. And they're technologies that we're going to love to use, I can assure you, as we try and engage with the world more rapidly, more efficiently, more effectively, and more so, we can't fly everywhere all the time. We're going to have to use virtual tools to engage with people, to maintain relationships, to progress with business opportunities, and go out and meet when we need to have a human interaction, but it really makes a difference. Work patterns, of course, are becoming much more mobile. We're already doing that. Just out of interest, if you get me to shut up for 1 minute, just out of interest, how many of you, for your staff, encourage mobile remote working from home or elsewhere? Can you give me a show of hands? Okay, well, it's relatively modest, isn't it? Okay, there may be very good reasons for that, that's fine. But actually, of course, increasingly, there's an awful lot of good economics to allow people to work more remotely. And of course, now, people will probably work anywhere to do almost anything to keep their job. But as we come out of the recession and you look at English-speaking smart people, will be in huge demand around the world, as education roughly lags about 8 years demand by fast-growth economies for smart business people. So we're going to find it harder to keep people. We'll have to be more accommodating about the lifestyle and the behaviour and the technology and the working arrangements. Remember the stuff we used to talk about in Gen Y, about how we have to do all these things to satisfy them? Well, right now we don't have to do quite so much, but we will have to go back and do those things in the future as we find it harder to keep our staff. One of the implications that's quite interesting is that if you can work away from the office more regularly, maybe you could live away from the office. And this study was asked, and Orange ran this study, and they said, okay, if you could live where you liked and didn't have to be near the office, where would you live? And 81% of people in the West Midlands said we'd leave. Bad luck, isn't it? I can't do this when I'm in Birmingham. Actually, I did. Sorry. Yeah, 70% in the East Midlands said they'd leave, 158% growth in the West Country, 58% growth in Scotland. They've all gone on holiday, effectively, and all the young people said they're going to London. So you get this amazing movement. Now, people aren't doing it yet because we haven't really still learned to do it. I mean, do you know people who work abroad, who work for British companies, who choose to live abroad? It's happening, increasingly happening. People who can work remotely are saying, actually, I don't need to work in the Midlands, I can go to the West Country. You think, hang on, I don't need to be in the West Country. I can go to Spain, or I can go to South France, or I can go to the West of France, or I can go anywhere, I can go to South Africa, or I can go to Canaries. And I know people who've gone to many of those countries and are doing relatively modest supervisory or managerial roles, and doing them from wherever they like, because they almost never went to the office anyway, and so many people in the office anyway just email each other from one pod to the next. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's a convenient way of using technology. We just need to stop doing those dark things and let people have more freedom. Of course, it's about trust. It's about, do we trust our staff to be doing anything when we get to see them? And that's a bit hard to get over moving forward. Okay, business models. We've got a couple more segments, okay? Are you all right? Good. Right, let's think about what's going on. There are all sorts of convergences between market sectors and subsectors that are overlapping and changing how they operate. Whether it's the telephone or the computers or It doesn't matter what you call it. In bioscience, the life guys are going to talk to the technologists, which, by the way, at university they find almost impossible to do. And our systems are in place to keep them from talking to each other, which, by the way, British government is working quite hard to overcome by cross chairs in universities. So you've got amazing change going on between sectors and the business models that are working in those sectors. And if they're not being changed by you, they're going to be changed by those that are outside who are growing their businesses, bringing them in. And we're seeing quite a lot now of what is called reverse modification of our models coming from markets that are developing them as startup models. Because people don't know how to do it our way when they start up businesses elsewhere and suddenly realise that actually would transfer over here. And it can be converted over here by the speed of an electron with those ideas travelling. In fact, you'll know the Jane Ann Guardian-inspired Virgin One account was the standard bank account arrangement for Australia. And over here it completely transformed the mortgage market. Everybody had to offer a pooled credit card and checking account and mortgage, and it was standard business in Australia. So just an idea flies across the ether and it can completely change a market. If you're in the middle of a market, if you're a broker in some fashion, if you're an agent, and if you've got a great value proposition, then there's no problem. If you add value genuinely to that. If you're not, you're just in the middle of a process, you are doomed. Because increasingly, as people downstream use technology, they want to talk to the people upstream directly for supply of that distribution of whatever that product is or service. So increasingly across these industries, insurance, advertising, the creative media industries, real estate, increasingly people, consumers, or people in the supply chain, will have more control over what's happening and talk to people upstream. Equally, people upstream actually are creating models that cannibalize their own distribution system by actually wanting to go down and talk to people further downstream. So you've got two motivations going on at the same time, that if you are in the middle, you better have a very, very clear view of why you add value and can't be replaced. Otherwise, you will be replaced. It's that simple. And there's vast amounts of evidence, and everywhere you look, you can see how easy it would be to replace people who feel safe today. And I love doing this to the insurance companies, because there is no need to have a general insurance company pool all the risk for you. You can do that better by your own friends in your LinkedIn network, and all agree one day that we'll pool ourselves together and we'll get an insurance company to price and underwrite and manage all of our property insurance. And you've taken out a whole swathe of profit, and you've got control, and I bet you your claims inflation and fraud levels are lower than theirs, which is their biggest issue. Yeah, so when we start doing this, and by the way, that organisation will help you do it. They already have self-insurance in companies, and of course now that's spilling over to individuals who can group their networks together and provide exactly the same capability. More effective, and you can have a big party on the profits at the end of the year. So, it's good news. We'll do things differently because we can do things differently. So, the other good news is that we want to collaborate more. You ask any CEO of any size organisation, we need to increasingly collaborate inside the organisation, across silos, across disciplines, across levels, and outside, increasingly with our partners, both upstream and downstream, and get more value and understanding and improvement into our organisation. Yeah? And that's a phenomenon that's been going on a while, but it's increasingly going to drive innovation and growth by latching onto those networks of people faster and quicker than we ever have before. Outside, of course, we can use tools like crowdsourcing and crowd supply chains. We can basically throw the net wider quicker to see who's got the capability to add to us quicker. So you ought to be using LinkedIn, I guess, dare say, and things like that. Who's on, let's say, LinkedIn? Let's pick on one. Who's got a LinkedIn account? Okay, brilliant. If you give me a show of hands now for those of you that regularly ask your LinkedIn network to help you with business problems in your company. You. One over there. Right. Everybody approach the chap at the back to understand that that's why you've got that network. What have you got it for otherwise? Is it just a useful business card management tool that has a perpetuity designed into it because people self-maintain? Yes, it's terrific. What it's for is to ask people who wanted to be part of your network for help and advice and guidance on issues that you've got that you feel like sharing with part of your network. It doesn't have to be all of them. I worked with a top 3 worldwide insurance company not so long ago, and they just run a weekend of innovation, their top team. And they invited me on a Sunday evening to go and look at it. So I jumped on the plane and went there, and just to make sure you know it's not British. Weird, perfect. So I got there, and they showed me what they did. I said, brilliant, terrific, marvellous, innovative stuff. No problem with that whatsoever. but nothing of that lines up with your vision. So signature, now it may be wrong, it may not be something you're working towards, that's fine. It may be how you want to project your company, and that's fine. But what it actually says is this, and not one of those ideas reinforces your ability to achieve that vision. Ah, you're right, they said. No, we've just wasted our time, haven't we? I said, yeah, but you've had a good time, you've bonded, you've done some stuff together, it's great ideas. One or two you can spin it off and start your own company, probably. But in terms of your own company, progressing your career or your business, you're doomed. I said, well, what I did do is ask my network before I left, what would you do to achieve the thing that your chairman said you're trying to achieve? And I had 50 pages of close-type text of people who could be bothered because I just happened to ask on that occasion, and they had a few moments to tell me their ideas. Their leader flew across the table, I kid you not, he was lying on the table and grabbed it out of my hand. And the only value they got that entire weekend was just what was in those papers. And he's hired us a number of times, a number of countries to go in and help them. Your network will come up with 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 brilliant ideas on how to solve your problem. We just need to trust the fact that our network is happy to respond to us. So what I suggest to you is, without declaring that you're stupid, because sometimes we're worried, aren't we, about asking questions, we should know it. Think about what question you could ask that will be valuable, that still makes you look intelligent and smart on top of everything, and ask your network and see who responds. And I guarantee you'll be staggered by the response. That's what social tools are for. Yeah? That's what they're for. So, we've done that. No, we haven't actually. There's one small thing about that I want to mention. We are so used to running management process that we've got reports and studies and meetings and email and telephone calls in a sequence of monthly, weekly and daily meetings or whatever. We're so used to that, they're embedded in our culture. And we love email. Hands up, who loves email? Yeah, it's a very, very useful tool, but broadly speaking, it's abusive the way we use it. There's nothing wrong with email, but it's a very abusive tool because it isn't communication, is it? It doesn't pass the test of communication. Because the definition of communication is you can impart something or request something and you can test understanding. It doesn't work like that. Email, by Friday do this. Our strategic plan is due in on Tuesday, I want by Monday your answer on that Friday afternoon. You know, it's a very abusive tool in many ways. It's a dump and run, it's a blah, 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 blah. We use it badly, nothing wrong with it. Smart tools like social networks allow us to throw up issues inside the organisation and let people who've got something worthwhile to say about it coalesce around the issue. And you might restrict different questions to different layers of the organisation, different networks, but you let people self-elect to say, I've got something to say on that. So we flag up issues and use a network-style management decision-making tool. That's what they're going to do. That's what some smart companies have been to work out. We haven't got time to do the things the old way. We've got to move faster on more issues. So I can't put 10 things on the list of things to do. I'm going to have 20. And I'll put them up and I'll let people coalesce around them and come with some crazy ideas and some brilliant ideas and some ideas that are from the industry and ideas even from outside the industry, dare I say it. If you think about the tomato ketchup bottle or what have you, we're quite capable of doing stupid things for quite a long time. Not you would do anything like that, I get that completely, but you know, sometimes we need to get out of the box and think of things in a very different way. And of course, tools from a marketing perspective is about attracting people, but then engaging people with the intention. You know, so often we attract people, we don't actually engage with them, and that's what people are crying out to do. If they like your brand and they like what you do, sometimes you call these people clients and they've got the money in the system and we like engaging with them. Sometimes they're not, and we don't necessarily want to spend the time or the effort or the energy engaging with them. But if you want your brand to be circulated well in your industry and market, then those tools are fantastic tools from a marketing perspective. And finally, gamifying, let's say, your innovation processes. How many of you are gamifying your innovation process? How many of you are monkeys? Okay, let's just talk about it for a moment, if I may. Gamification, along with a bunch of other things, is one of the interesting drivers, and this is part of that whole suite of thinking about behavioural science and how we're adopting new stances to get people to behave differently. The British government, through the Cabinet Office, has got 2 programs running right now, incredibly successful. And one is to drive the increase in tax uptake on personal income tax, and the other one is to drive down the welfare fraud. And they're both incredibly successful projects, and they're using behavioural science and some aspects, gameplay and gamification. And I'll give you one example of gameplay that sort of works. It may illustrate this reasonably well. This camera here is a speed camera in Sweden. And they've just finished the project, and they're rolling it out now massively. And what he did basically was take a picture of every car that went past, irrespective of whether they were speeding or not. And all those that were speeding were fined. And that fine money went into a pool, and they drew for people who were driving under the speed limit to get a share of that money. Now when you approach that camera, I'd rather go fast and get there quickly, or I can go a bit slower and have a chance of winning some money. And they had a massive effect, dramatic effect on the number of people who drove slower. And they're rolling this round now to what they call kindergartens and junior schools, first of all, to get that behavioural change going. So gamification, helping people, I can give you economic stories as well, which are much more dull, but in Denmark, others are doing this, lots of examples right around Europe, where quite mundane, prosaic sorts of organisations are encouraging people to interact using gameplay, and people love playing games, because people love interaction and personalisation. Even we do if we're a bit quietly, we quite like to go somewhere and actually be able to interact rather than just be presenting something in a sort of dull fashion. So, technology, then I want to talk a little bit about what to do with some of this stuff. Is that alright? Because I'm just chucking heaps of stuff at you. Do you know, if I had a whole day, I'd keep this up all day, you'd never make it, but you know. I know it's a lot to cope with. The good news is all this material is finally being made available to you. I should have said that at the very beginning to save anybody making notes, but you can have all of this. They've got hot links to a lot of these sources at the bottom of the screen, so a lot on that one of course, but bottom of the screen there's links to the resources that allow you to pursue if you want to a little bit further. So there's no problem with that. You can use this internally and share it with people if you want. So let's think about some of the technologies that are going to completely and utterly change what we do and how we do it and where we do it. And these are familiar, aren't they? We know about Internet, we've been using that for ages. We've had Internet 1, we now have Internet 2, which is smart, interactive. Internet 3 is fairly well defined, and Internet 4. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Cloud services, i.e. the things that we used to do on our own devices, now being done by somebody else, beyond the Internet effectively, or private network. Social networks, which are about 40 different types of social networks and hundreds of different tools. So you need to have an idea of what they are all for before you launch off in any sort of strategy embracing social tools, because they operate very differently. Mobile devices, as I mentioned earlier on, big data is the most exciting thing, and is the next big thing. Yeah, big data. So if you understand business analytics, or part of your company's offer is business analytics, you're about to make a lot of money. Because the amount of data that we as organisations, and bigger companies as well, and governments, and society is going to have at its disposal is massive by comparison to the past. This is another one of those examples where we can't use the past to predict the future. Very, very, very different world. The regulator gets this. The way that the financial services companies are using it is quite extraordinary in terms of using big data and fast systems to process that information very rapidly indeed. Is going to change the way we work and how we work. So, enough of that. One of the things about technology, and I started in 1973 as a computer operator on a 1904S mainframe, and it's now an exhibit in the Science Museum, which I find rather dating, but there we are. The first thing we do with new technologies is we do things differently. Yeah, that's a fairly reasonable statement. We get a new technology and we do things differently. After a while, when we realise its true capacity, we do different things. And they may sound like similar concepts, but they're completely different. I know of organisations that replaced all their desktop PCs with laptops, and people still sat at the same desk. What was the point of that? You know, you can get up and move with it now. And then eventually we had, we can have coffee rooms and malls in the buildings where we can meet. Yeah, and then you can go outside, well that's good too. And then you can go live somewhere else, and that's good too. And then I can go live abroad, well that's good too. So incredibly slowly you move away from old thinking with new technology changes. It's very, very slow. If you think about tin can for a moment, how amazing it was for the first tin can opener to be patented after the first tin cans were in regular daily use. 6 months? 2 years? 5? 15? There is actually a website on the history of the tin can, so you can go and check it out. Mr. Westbury created it. It took 48 years for the first tin can opener to be patented. Because what you always did was chop the lid off with a sword or an axe or a saw or a dagger. Because that's how you got into things. And what was wrong with chopping the top with a sword or an axe or a dagger? Because that's what you did, and everybody was doing that. And somebody came about it and opened it and went, duh, that's a good idea. We are unbelievably slow for recognising opportunities and what technology allows us to do. Unbelievably slow. If you think you're behind the curve on a lot of technological things, you're probably not. But just think about the next technology that pitches up in your world And you think, do we really need that? Have we got to have that? What benefit is that to us? Okay, give them all one anyway, because they'll get upset otherwise. Think what can you really, really do for the way you offer your product or service to your customers or your distribution channel. What could you really, really do differently? And that's where the opportunity lies. We're not in getting it out quick into the hands of people who do the same things. There's my fast computer, 500 times faster in the next 10 years. What difference is that going to make? Yeah, sorry, 6 years. 500 times faster. So that's computer processing power out the window. We don't care about that anymore. The size of the internet is currently about 2 billion people, and we're going to add about another 3 billion people in the next few years. Yeah, the O3B project, which has got 18 satellites and partly funded by Google, is pointing its satellite beams at the developing and non-provided for countries who can't get access to the internet. And they're not doing that simply to buy from you, they're doing that to sell to the world. So the internet is about to get really, really interesting as 3 billion new people get online and start flogging stuff and looking great and looking just like you as anybody else if you've got a product, or just like you as a service, and then going to jump on a plane and come over quickly. So we're going to see a transformation in the number of people who are online and pitching products, services and ideas that we've never seen before in the next few years, all by satellite, all connecting the smartphones they've already got with the internet, which already exists, by a satellite system that's almost now complete. So this isn't something that's hanging around for years, this is going to happen overnight, and we're off. Very, very interesting change. Data itself has gone through the roof in terms of the amount of data we're generating, most of it user-generated, I might add, clicks and likes and all these sort of things. And of course, in the corporate world, it's email and Word and Excel and PowerPoint and this good stuff. Currently, we're almost up to a zettabyte, which is lots of petabytes, lots of terabytes, lots of gigabytes, lots of megabytes. So it's a petabyte 1 with 21 noughts after it. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah? We've got one after all these years of digital communication. We're going to have 35 zettabytes in just the next 10 years. So order of magnitude, 35 times more data to deal with. That's why I say if you're into business analytics or analytics at all around data, you're going to make a huge amount of money. Because we want to make sense of that data, find opportunities, gaps in markets, clients and customers, channels we can exploit, and vice versa, reverse, looking for you. Hopefully you're visible so that new partners can engage with you as well. So, in the corporate world, of course, the business world tends to be the products I mentioned, and roughly every 5 years or so, would have 10 times more data to manage. And increasingly, that's going to be subject to regulatory compliance or security. So we're going to have to get cleverer at managing data that's mostly unstructured. And unstructured, at the moment, is just Word and Excel and PowerPoint, which is incredibly easy to manage. In the future, it's going to be sound and voice and image and expression and tone of voice and all the other things that human beings interact with via video technology. Now, life gets very complicated there, in terms of discovery and legal discovery of that, and in terms of recording information about interaction with your distribution chain of clients. We're going to increasingly have to manage that well across our technology platform, and it's all going video. Most of you by now, of course, have got video on your sites, of your products, your services, your technical specifications, your marketing, your success stories, of course, are all now video, not in 6-point grey text on white background. Yeah? Because that's what most folk want these days, and increasingly we will want video because it's more useful. So, enough of that. Also, every one of those devices we've got in our pockets, if you've got a smartphone, is going to generate about a gigabyte, 1.3 gigabytes of data every month. And there's 6 billion in the world generating 1.3 gigabytes of data every month. Where am I? What am I doing? What am I photographing? What am I looking at? Who's next to me? Blah, blah, blah. Where am I going next? Where have I been? All that information is being shown out all the time. If you get some way of accessing that, by the way, the EC wants you to have it for free. All government information, the EC is about, it's going through the EC channels at the moment. It's been proposed in March, is that all countries give away all government data that is allowed to be given away to companies, particularly SMEs, who can then innovate on top of it with products and service offerings. That's one of the ways that the EC is trying to make a more knowledge society. So, good stuff. The other thing is, of course, technology itself is going to be given away. The Arkash tablet came out in February in India. The Indian government has taken a contract to give one of these to all students. So they will now be better off as far as technology goes than most other countries in the world. And this thing has Has a gigabyte of onboard memory, it's a fast processor, runs Android, it's a full-size, good graphics screen. This is version 2 already, and it's $35. If you wanted to buy one yourself, and by the way you can't get one because of supply issues, it'll cost you $70.